So what we've been thinking in this bit of Mark is thinking, what does it mean to follow Jesus? To see Jesus' identity and then take up your cross and to follow. And there's been various sort of sub-themes we've come up from time to time, like childlike trust and spiritual blindness. And in this man here, Bartimaeus, and Bartimaeus, we saw he's the son of Timaeus. Bart means son, so he's the son of Timaeus. Mark gives us a worked example, really, of everything we've been looking at. So how do we come to Jesus and keep following him, and brings together some of those themes and some of the contrasts that we've had as well. Is it worth it? How do we know it? How do we encourage others to keep going? And there's three particular things I want us to focus on from these words here. First, although he's blind, he has spiritual sight. Secondly, he's determined to meet Jesus. And thirdly, he follows Jesus to the cross. So I think three ways we can follow Bartimaeus' example in following Jesus. So firstly, although he's blind, he sees. Verse 46 and 47. And they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out, saying, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, interestingly, this is the last miracle that Mark records. It's the last miracle in Mark's gospel, barring the resurrection. Now, if you remember, the book of Mark is in two halves. So the first half is full of miracles. Actually, we know they're not all the miracles that happen, but we're just miracle after miracle. And what the miracles do is they show us Jesus' identity. And it's all to do with authority. The miracles show us that Jesus has authority over the things that only God has authority over. So his teaching is equal with God's teaching. He has authority over the weather, over sickness, over the spirits, and even over death. Second half of Mark, there are just three miracles, four if you include the resurrection. Two of those are sight miracles, and in between them there's another miracle of delivering a boy from an evil spirit. So if you remember, in the first half we thought about how Mark likes his sandwiches. We have these sandwiches, little sandwiches usually, where you have the main teaching with two other related bits that support it. So what we have in this bit from chapter 9 to the end of 10 is like a mega sandwich that Mark's made for us. So we have a sight miracle, some teaching, and a sight miracle that holds it together. And before the first sight miracle, there were some deaf miracles as well. And Mark places these things as they are to make a point. So he placed that first sight miracle to show us that it is a miracle that we hear or see the gospel, that we can hear and see Jesus and who he is. You are not a Christian, if you are one here this morning. You are not a Christian because you're more spiritual or more clever than other people you know. That's not why you're a Christian. You're not a Christian because you had a better preacher. But you are a Christian because the Holy Spirit opened your dead ears to the gospel and your blind eyes to see Jesus. Now, I've used this, I'm going to use it a bit later on. Given I went through the hassle of the surgery last year, I'm going to use it for illustrations from time to time. So I use my ear as an illustration, or the lack of. So what I have here is purely to keep my glasses up. It doesn't do anything else. And there's nothing that you can do about that. People say, oh, can you add this or that? So nothing can be done about it. It needs a miracle to hear. I know a few people are praying for that just to see the radiographer's face. And next scan I have. Nothing you can do about it. It needs a miracle. That's all that will happen. And that's what we need. The section starts with a man who is totally blind and nothing can be done about it. And Jesus touches him and then he can see. But when Jesus asks him what he sees people walking around, but they look like trees. Well, clearly that's not right. I suppose like when I take my glasses off, that's pretty much what you look like. It's not quite right. And then Jesus touches him again and he sees clearly. And we saw how that is what Peter is like. And then a bit later, we saw James and John are like that as well. That they now finally see who Jesus is. They get his identity. He's the Christ. But they don't see why he came. They don't see that he had to die on a cross. And they don't see that to follow, they have to take up their cross and follow him. Now we get, then we have some teaching about that. And now we get to this one, this miracle. And it's just before, it's the end of this section, before Jesus then goes into Jerusalem, which is what happens in the next chapter. And this section is completed with the healing of Bartimaeus. So notice he is physically blind, but has spiritual sight. And we keep seeing this in all four Gospels, lots of examples of this, that those who should get Jesus don't. And those who should not get Jesus do. Those who have all the resources and background to understand what's happening before them don't get Jesus. Those who, by all rights should not get who he is, do. So the religious experts miss the point entirely. The 12, as we keep seeing, get it a bit muddled up, some progress. But the outcasts, whether they're rich or poor, sinners, the blind, they get it. So Jesus is walking through Jericho. He's just coming out. We're about now 15 miles from Jerusalem. And he passes near a blind man called Bartimaeus, who's begging. Pretty typical first century sight. And he calls out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. So he's heard that it's Jesus of Nazareth that is coming. He can't know all that much. But there's two vital things that he knows. He sees who Jesus is and his need for Jesus. He sees who Jesus is because he calls out, Son of David. And he sees his need for Jesus because he cries out, have mercy on me. Now, Son of David is a messianic term. It's a Christ term. In the next chapter, when Jesus enters Jerusalem, it's a title Jesus picks up for himself, that he is the Son of David, David's greater son. So this is a fulfillment from the Old Testament. In Ezekiel, for example, there's loads of places we could go, but in Ezekiel, there's a promise that the Christ will be David's greater son and will shepherd and rule his people. Ezekiel also makes the same promises of God coming, and we see those coming together in Jesus. And in 2 Samuel 5 that I read to you, which is what you might have thought was a curious passage, 2 Samuel 5, just after David is anointed in Jerusalem, we're told how he takes Jerusalem. So he takes Jerusalem from the people of the land, the Jebusites, and they taunt David because they think that Zion is so secure. They say, the blind and the lame can beat you away. Even the blind and the lame can beat your army. And so David refers to them as the blind and the lame when he beats them. And a saying comes up that the blind cannot enter the house. So notice how Jesus fulfills that. The blind still can't enter the house, but he makes the blind have sight. He goes to Jerusalem with an ex-blind man who can now enter with him. That's why there's these weird rules in the Old Testament about certain people excluded from the temple, to show that in the future heavenly temple, we'll all be perfect. Jesus heals people to allow them to come in, which he'll do for all of us on the last day. So he recognizes that though he's blind, he sees what other people miss. And then he asks for mercy. So he must be confident in Jesus. Jesus can change his situation, in this case his blindness and his dependency on passers-by, that they might show mercy and put some money on his coat. And we see this theme again. Bartimaeus is empty. He is dependent. He's not trusting in himself. He has nothing to offer. Merely he calls for mercy. And that's a repeated theme we've had as well, isn't it? The need for a miracle, for spiritual sight. He sees with our eyes what everyone else misses, who Jesus is and his need for him. Now, Mark keeps on repeating himself, and so I think it's okay for me to do it. Our need is spiritual sight, and that is miraculous. You need sight to see your need, And you need sight to see that that need is met in Jesus, because he is what we've seen in the first half. He is God come as a man to men and women. That miracle has to happen if you're to become a Christian, if you're to be a follower of Jesus. And as we've seen, it's a constant miracle as we mature. It's not a case of, oh, that's good, I'm now Christian, miracle done. But we need ongoing eyes being opened, ears being opened, hearts being opened, as we grow as Christians, to see more and more of Jesus' glory, to see things of him that we had not seen before, or to know them more personally and dearly to us. And so we pray for others. Well, we have a prayer meeting. We pray for all sorts of things at the prayer meeting. But among them, we pray for others to have this miracle. Non-Christians, we know that they will see their need, and they'll see spiritually, they will see Jesus for themselves. And for ourselves, that our eyes would be more and more open to see Jesus more clearly, and as a result, to love him more dearly. So that's the first thing. Although blind, he sees, which is what we need. Secondly, he's determined to meet Jesus in verses 48 to 49. So another sub-theme in Mark 9 to 10 is let the little children come. So literally let the little children come, but also let the childlike come. And the lost, and the blind, and whoever. Again, it's about being the least, about being a beggar. Was it Spurgeon? It was someone who said, preaching is just a beggar showing other beggars where the food is. And yet again, what we have is people being kept from Jesus. We've seen that a few times, haven't we? So ironically, Jesus is going through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem, where he's going to die for people like Bartimaeus. And yet the crowd are keeping him away from Jesus, and they're trying to stop him. Now notice a couple of things about this. Firstly, it's Jesus' attitude towards Bartimaeus, but also Bartimaeus' attitude towards Jesus, his determination to get to Jesus. So just as when the disciples tried to stop the children, and just as when they tried to stop this unnamed preacher, Jesus says, call him. With the others, he says, don't do that. But this one specifically, positively says, call him. So their attitude then changes. They've been stopping Bartimaeus, and then Jesus says, call him. So they go, okay, we better do that then. And they do it. And they say, Bartimaeus, take heart. Now, usually that phrase, take heart, we find on, apart from here, we find on Jesus' lips. So I think this is positive. It's not, I always read it sort of sarcastically, but it's a positive thing that he should take this to heart. And again, there's a warning to Jesus' disciples and followers. And we can say to the church in Mark's day, but also in our day. Basically, don't keep out the riffraff. Actually, proactively call them. Why? Because Jesus came for them. And as we saw a few weeks ago, because we are them. We're not better than them. And so we don't just keep them out, we call them in. Not just people who are like us, but people who are anything but like us. And we need to see that we are not different. And so we want to reach those kind of people. So that's that side. They keep him out and Jesus says, call him. But the other is, notice Bartimaeus and his determination. People put him off. So he calls out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. They put him off. Verse 46, he cried out all the more. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. He will not be put off by anyone. This is his shot at meeting Jesus, and no one's going to get in his way. Are we just a little bit too easily put off? The equivalent of, shut up, Bartimaeus. Okay, I'm only a blind person. What puts us off, and why? And maybe we're put off by those around us, family, friends, colleagues, this sort of general vibe in society that says, don't bother with Jesus for various reasons. It's just going to waste your time, or it makes you a bit ridiculous, fear of rejection, whatever it might be. Or just maybe you feel isolated because everyone seems to be over there and we're spending time over here. Maybe the church has put people off. We know that it has, through hypocrisy or abuse or scandal. And there's nothing new in any of those things as it happens. Sometimes, sadly, Christian family and friends put each other off. It's great you've become a Christian now, but you don't want to be too keen. You don't want to be one of those weird Christians. But those are just excuses. If Jesus is who he says, and our needs are what he says they are, then they're just excuses. And that's the issue, isn't it? It's a combo of those two things. Either we're not clear enough about our need before him and who we are, or we're not clear enough about who Jesus is. So again, we need those blind eyes open to see our hopeless state without Jesus. We need our blind eyes to open and see Jesus' identity and again more of his glory and majesty. And that it be not just something, oh yeah, his glory is majestic, something experiential for us even. The one sent by God with power to save. And if either of those ideas are diminished in our mind, then our view of Jesus or our need, then following Jesus becomes not an urgent matter for us and something that can be put off, can be placed lower in our list of priorities of things that we have. So look at Bartimaeus and think of yourself. Are you determined to meet with Jesus? Are you determined to meet with him alone? To meet with him in his body, the gathered church. Remember, we believe in the church. It's not a sort of incidental, it's part of our creed. We believe in the church. What stops that? What stops us wanting to meet with Jesus? What stops you? Could you imagine the reasons that put Jesus and meeting with him lower down the list of other stuff? Could you imagine explaining that to a persecuted Christian? Well, it sort of fits in down here because wouldn't even understand what you meant. Could you imagine if Jesus sort of sat, we went out to tea and coffee and there was Jesus. And he said, why do I sort of feature so low in your priorities? Would we with a straight face be able to say those things? Do you share Bartimaeus' determination to meet Jesus? And thirdly, he follows Jesus to the cross. So Bartimaeus is very similar and very different to John and James, the sons of Zebedee we looked at last week. In both cases, Jesus says to them, what do you want me to do for you? And James and John, they want the place of honor and status. They sort of feel that their worth should be reflected in the kingdom to come. Bartimaeus answers the question, which just meet my need. I'm desperate. He doesn't think he deserves anything, interestingly. He just asks for mercy, which by definition is undeserved. James and John address Jesus as teacher, Bartimaeus as rabbi, which functionally means the same thing. They're very similar, but rabbi is more respectful. He is someone who is over me, so he's showing greater insight. And it turns out, as we saw, that James and John will give up everything for Jesus, but they don't yet see it. They're still thinking in worldly terms about the kingdom. But Bartimaeus immediately goes straight to following Jesus. He throws off his cloak. Now, this is his outer garment, and beggars would take off that when they got to the spot they're going to beg. They take off their coat, as I did just before. They fix the heating, and I'm now overheating. They take off their overcoat in front of them, and that's where you put the money down. And Mark draws attention to the fact he throws it away, like the disciples at the beginning of Mark, and they throw away their nets. It's a way of showing their old way, their old dependency has gone, and they're taking a new path. And now, verse 52, Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. Now, it's a striking thing, isn't it, that what is the first thing Bartimaeus sees? The first thing he sees is Jesus. And Jesus says, "Go on your way." But he goes on Jesus' way. And in Greek, the word way and road is the same thing. He goes on the road that Jesus is on, literally to Jerusalem. which is where we pick up next week in chapter 11. Quite literally, the way goes to Jerusalem. So this section between two sight miracles is about seeing Jesus and why he came, which is to die for sinners. And to follow him, you have to take up your cross and follow. There's a cost. It is worth it, but there's a cost. When we come to chapter 11 in Jerusalem, the cross is just days away, what people often call Holy Week. And Bartimaeus does not, I presume, know the detail of that Jesus has been speaking about it. But his literal direction, what Mark is drawing our attention to, is his literal direction is to Jerusalem, is instructive for us. We follow Jesus to Jerusalem, so to speak. We follow Jesus to the cross. It's to take up our cross and follow him there to the place of disgrace where we find life. Now, what is the difference between us doing that and not doing that? We've seen in previous weeks what that is. We've seen is whether we see if Jesus is worth it or not. Or is it that we see that he is worth it and the other things that we hold in his place are not worth it, ultimately. Save your life, lose it. Lose your life, oh, then you save it. Chop off your hand, chop off your foot, pluck out your eye. It's all better to do that than go into hell with them. I use then, again, I may as well milk it while I can, use again my illustration of the ear. I had a choice. I mean, the surgeon didn't really present it as a choice, but I had the opportunity of losing my inner ear and living or keeping it. And that would have been less of a hassle last year. But ultimately would have caused me deafness and then eventually death. I do know one person who made that option. So we put it like that, this is a stupid choice. I mean, it's not really a choice, is it? It's an obvious thing. I lost an ear, balance for a bit, hearing at one side. So when people calling out answers, I didn't know where they were coming from. But it's obvious decision, isn't it? It's the same with following Jesus. Following Jesus is totally worth it. It's not without a cost. It's not without inconvenience. There is a short-term loss, but you gain life. Even as we saw last week now. When we consider the alternative. And I can't guarantee you what that cost might be. I think I've told this story before, but many years ago, church I was part of, it was just after I left actually, but the minister there was talking to a lady who wasn't a Christian, and she said, but what if God calls me to, I don't know, go off to a dangerous country or something? And she had young children. And normally we sort of go, well, he doesn't do that. It's not really quite how it works. It's sort of true. But his reply to us, yeah, what if? I can't guarantee that he wouldn't. We don't know what the cost is of following Jesus. There might be some obvious costs that you may have now. What if? As it happened, she did become a Christian soon after that conversation. Our sacrifices may be very small. Often they tend to be, but they can pull on us, can't they? And this is the good news that we offer to others, but it comes with a warning. It's worth it, but you are following a crucified Christ and we carry his shame. Now, how do we and how can we follow Jesus? How will we persuade others to? And that's just what we've looked at. We need the miracle of sight, of spiritual sight, to see the glory of Jesus and our need, which leads to being determined to meet with him. He is all that and worth being determined to meet him and dropping other things for. And thirdly, we follow him in the shame of the cross. Let's pray.